Hey, welcome back to the Field of Faith podcast. I'm Chris, and with me as always...
What's up, guys? Luke is here.
And we've got some pretty interesting stuff that we're going to kind of chit-chat about today. Just stuff of some of the things that we've seen on TikTok, some of the other conversations. You were talking about like a song from Dax about knowing your worth. And I just think it's really interesting. This has obviously been more on your head than anything else, because while we've been doing the workouts with Forge, you've been at the bottom writing, know your worth.
Yeah, I'm glad you actually noticed that, and you make fun of it every time I do it. So
I do, because, well, I mean, a lot of the societal things, which is what we're going to dive into, is this idea, of course, is like knowing your worth and where that actually stems from, where it comes from. And, we're just going to argue about it because, as men, we don't talk about it. And I think every single one of us is going to come at this with a different perspective of, where do we find our worth? Where do we find our value? How do we determine if we're valuable? But, it's all different, and each person is going to experience it in different ways as they kind of grow up, as they're younger, what their relationship was with their dad, with their mom, everything in between.
Yeah. And I think, I know myself just dealing with self-worth, being a father, a husband, a businessman, so to speak, a leader, and full-time job and everything in between. It's my self-worth struggles a lot because I feel like I'm at the top of the world of like, man, I am exceeding because I'm doing all this. But then at the end of the day, I'm like, am I actually doing all this? Am I actually worth doing all this? Are people actually caring that I'm here right now? Like, I could easily just disappear, and would anybody even notice? Because do people even care that I'm showing up today?
Well, I think that's the underlying thing of most men. We have this concept of ourselves, and we wonder, like, what is it that I'm doing that actually people want to be around? Why is it that, they choose to, like, be around me? And a lot of the times we just don't see it in public. We don't get that feedback a lot of the times that I think, like, we're looking for. And I also think we're part of that social media generation, that idea of, like, hey, how many likes did you get? How many people are commenting on it? And, chasing after, like, validation is something that I think society has really pressed upon us and get that feedback for us, but it's not all the time. You were talking about it before we started recording, so I want you to go into it, but, like, the idea that we're never going to know our worth until the end, until our funeral.
Yeah, I was listening to Dax's fairly new song, To Be a Man, with Darius Rucker. And, just talking about the hardships of being a man. And if you actually watch the music video, there's in one of the scenes actually has a cop. And the cop was hired just to be an actor in this. And during the song, while he's actually singing, this cop starts breaking down in tears. And that wasn't part of it. Just because he was, hearing the lyrics of, like, what it means to be a man. And, like, you'll never understand your worth and you'll never hear your worth until the day you die. Like, dude, that struck a chord in me of, like, that's the reality. Is, like, we won't actually know our worth until the day we die. Right? From a biblical perspective of, like, hey, you've been a good and faithful servant, right? Yeah. But at the end of the time, it's like, how often do we actually hear, like, man, I'm proud of you. You're crushing it. You're doing this. You're doing that. We might hear that from a boss saying, yeah, you're doing really good in sales. Whoop-de-doo. You know what I mean? Like, great. I'm glad I'm earning more money for the company. But it was this idea of you're going to get like 45 minutes at your funeral someday where you're going to have 5, 6, 7, if you're lucky, 7 people come up and share stories and amazing testimonies about your life and the good things you did and how proud they were of you. And it's like, you will actually never hear that because you will be dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the only time that you're going to actually get a allotted amount of time for people to speak highly of you is when you are gone. And you see that so many times, and it jacked me up because it's like, dude, I think I need that. A lot of times I even tell my wife, like, man, I don't need to hear words, but it's like, I need to hear words, not just from you, but from the people around me, from that I'm actually doing valuable work and that I'm an asset to this world, Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's, I think it also goes to what your state of mind is, though, too. If we're constantly looking for outward approval, I don't think we're ever going to be satisfied with it. I think it literally comes down to, like, well, what is that inward discussion that you're having? What is your relationship like with Christ? And how is your walk been with him? Because I think the validation for a lot of people is, I'm looking for it elsewhere because it hasn't always been fully satisfied in Christ. And I think the perfect description of that is look at the prophets of the Old Testament. I mean, you can look at their life and like, hey, I'm bringing the message of God, and some of them are being thrown out of cities. Hey, don't come here. We don't want you. Oh, Moses. I mean, the Mosaic covenant is passed down through him, but beaten. Hey, who are you? Send somebody else. You can't really talk. Okay, I need this. I need that. And the struggle of it is not a matter of what am I worth. I think it's like, how am I valuing myself in the eyes of Christ? And are we facilitating our own existence along the lines of our walks with God? Because there's a lot of things that I would say that, hey, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And that I'm looking for other things to kind of fill the void of where Christ is meant to be in my day-to-day walk and my day-to-day life. But again, that's me. And so I said, we're going to argue about it.
I mean, we don't need to argue, but we could talk about it, because I think our perspectives are similar, but also very different. Because, I think I try to look at my self-worth, and like from time to time, and I definitely don't do it enough, of like, all right, God, I know I'm enough to you. But sometimes you don't always even show it, or I don't notice it, or I don't see it in this way, or my perspective is still, skewed because of the way things are in life. And I think I need a combination of both. I need a worldly success view from the people around me of like, hey, you're doing it. People all the time, oh man, what you guys are doing with Field and Faith, that's great work. But it's like, yeah, that's great, but I don't take validation in that. And I don't want people, like, I'm purposely fighting myself to not take validation of that, because one, I know my pride. Yeah, I would love to be like, yeah, we're kicking butt, dude. This is awesome. Yeah, thank you. We need to hear that more. It's like, but I don't want that. Yeah. I actually want to know we're doing good work, and I want maybe from the people we're doing the work for to tell us that, I don't know. I don't know the perspective and the right way to accept that. Yeah. But I'm like forcing myself to not accept a lot of it, because I don't want the pride aspect to get in the way of the work. But at the same time, I'll share a story that kind of happened to me last week that wrecked me. I was watching a movie, and this dad was talking to his son, and I must have been super engaged in the movie, because the dad and son relationship was terrible. So of course, that just resonates, and the dad goes, "I'm proud of you, son." And usually, like movies, I'm like, this is fake, it's whatever. Dude, I started crying. And the reality is, like, I sat there for like a half hour going, why? Why, God? Why is this? Why am I frustrated this? Like, I know that you are proud of me and this and that, and like I can fall back on that, but at the same time, why is this messing me up? Because I know I will never hear that phrase in this life. And for some reason, that validation jacked me up.
Yeah. And I mean, there's just so many things. I think a lot of the times, of course, with like guys, I think we've developed over the course of our life is that we're always in like competition with one another. We never want to acknowledge somebody else's like feats. We never want to like continue to like encourage somebody or just like acknowledge the past. I think it's a lot of the times nobody acknowledges what you've done until you've already been successful. But every step along the way, you're alone and you're in the dark, because nobody is encouraging you when there's no results. Everyone just wants to hop on board once there's so many people who are already invested into the situation or into the person, and even at that point, and then everyone kind of comes along and goes, well, are they actually with me, or are they just wanting to be around you because of the success in different capacities? Because, we haven't, had a organization that has 50, 60 kids. Not saying that's not going to happen, but until that day comes where there's a bunch more kind of, I would say, fruit that other people can kind of look at, it's just been like, oh, that's a good idea. Oh, good job. Okay. And there hasn't been the encouragement. There hasn't been the like uplifting, hey, you guys are doing awesome, even if one kid shows up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think too, like if you look at the success of people and people wanting to jump on the bandwagon, is like, and this is just my perspective, is like, are they jumping on the bandwagon of that person because of that person's success, so all the stuff around it, or are they just wanting to have that same success feeling of being around that person, right? Because they see all the people, man, you are so successful, this is great, and they just want to, take a piece of that. Yeah. right? They just want that self-worth and that self-value. They're just trying to steal a little piece of that. Not necessarily they're trying to steal the success from it, but just the validation of that success.
Well, totally. And then we put so many things into our lives of like, what is deemed as successful? It's like, why do people drive Mercedes or BMWs? It's like they're symbols of success. I had a buddy who was a real estate agent, and he was driving around, a Volkswagen Golf, and he's like, I loved this car. He goes, but I had to get a Lexus because as a real estate agent, he goes, people wanted to see success in the way that I drove a car. And what's the one thing that people always see you pull up in is a Lexus. He goes, it had nothing to do with anything, but people, when they see a symbol of something about you, they immediately go, oh, this person's worth more. And it's like when clients charge money, it's like, oh, I must be getting a better product because I'm paying X amount of dollars more. And some people are just delusioned to the idea that, oh, like wine, perfect example. Like they've done studies and studies and studies on bottles of wine, and it's like, oh, the $400 bottle of wine must be so much better. And then they do blind taste tests, and the $10 bottle of wine is better tasting to them. And it's just like, but you associate value with how much one thing costs. And so if it costs you more, it must be more valuable to you. So
perception is reality.
Oh, totally.
It was crazy. I was listening to another podcast this morning, and they were talking about in Abu Dhabi how just everybody's just loaded, right? Because they have like, you're either the upper middle class or you're on the lower end, and there's no in between. And so everybody drives like the same cars. Like everybody has G-Wagons and that kind of stuff. And they can't tell the cars apart, and there's no value in it because everybody has that same car. So they've done some sort of system with license plates now. So the lower your number is, the more money you paid for it. So they actually have a value based on your license plate. So if you're like a number 3 or number 5 or number 7, you paid a ton of money for that license plate. So they put this value onto a number system. So that's how you kind of tell who's who and who's worth more in that country, is by the license plate and the value of you paid for that license plate and that number to be able to establish that.
Geez, I'm trying to pay the least amount possible. So give me
tax, yeah.
Give me the 0. Give me I got this vehicle donated to me, so I didn't have to pay for it. Like, it's just a world concept, and it's, it's chasing after the wind. That's why I love like the book of Ecclesiastes, because it's just like, what are we chasing after? What are we trying to go after? But the world is obviously telling us like, hey, this is where people are looking for. This is where we find that validation. This is where we, find that success. And I think the struggle is, going back to what we were talking about earlier, is where do we find that value in? Because if I'm constantly looking for other people to say, oh, good job, Chris, you did such a fantastic job, I feel like I'd be let down. Now, I have an amazing, encouraging wife who's been amazing in this category. I get the little TikToks all the time, like, I love you. And like, she's very like communicative and stuff like that with how she expresses her love towards me and everything like that, and appreciative. But at the exact same time, I'm not just looking from her. And I'm also not manipulating that in order to get things that I want out of it as well. And so I think our relationship has kind of been like, hey, we encourage each other in different capacities of what we're doing. We express our love to one another, but it's not the end all be all. I think that validation essentially comes with our relationship with Christ. That's me.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's true. It is true because it's, just the way we're supposed to be. That's what the Bible tells us, but we're also trained to have this conditional aspect and this conditional validation and love. And that's what the world shows. You only have a self-value if you do such and such thing. And I think too, that's why it's so important for us to have a guys group, because that's who we're challenging with, right? That's who we're going to war with all the time, is these guys. And these are the guys that are in the trenches with us, and they actually can validate us in that way of Christ, right? And I think having a wife validate you is great, but it never seems enough. Yeah. And I think I don't know, at least for me, myself, is like, is it her just doing it to cheer me up, right? There's always a conditional mindset behind
it. Feels that way all the time.
Yeah, it feels conditional, right? And it's not, and I'm not trying to say my wife doesn't do that, but it's just, I come home and you can clearly see that I've had a rough day, and it's just like, oh, you did a great job today. It's like, well, do you actually mean that? And then the same thing with my kids. It's like, what's crazy is I can't take validation from my children. But the second I screw up, I take so much validation of I'm a terrible father, right? I could take the negative aspects of it, but I can't take the positive. And I think that's why I need men's groups just as much as like, you know, we're trying to do it for other guys, as much as I need it to challenge myself to be somebody, to be that Jesus figure for somebody else, because I also need a Jesus figure in my own life of the times that I'm not in the place that I need to be, in the place to validate myself. Or for Christ, you know, if I'm not having that relationship with Christ, I need a guy to kind of step in and to be that figure for me.
Yeah. And I think what we're doing right now with Forged is, you know, we're engaged in 3 days a week, just kind of doing workouts and being around one another. But the idea, I think, is there's confidence gained through going through struggle. And as you get older, you really lose that teamwork mentality. You're no longer involved in competitive sports where you're like on a basketball team or a football team together, where you're in the trenches, you know, working out together, building that on. And you really forget like, oh man, that was actually like really validating. But when you're in high school or college and you've played those sports, it wasn't like, hey, I'm encouraging you. It's like, you better do this. Whereas like what we're trying to do is like, hey, we're going to push you guys. We're going to challenge you. We're going to push our bodies. We're going to exercise. And that process is going to give you confidence, because it's not going to happen overnight. Like we say it when we're working out, like, hey, don't expect results for 2 to 3 weeks. Like your body's got to get used to it. But if you're eating healthy, you're doing the right things, you're exercising, and you're putting in some of the work, there is that validation. And there is some self-worth that goes along with like the accomplishment of hard things. So I think like the polar plunge is very popular, or the ice bucket. You know, people are getting in and doing the cold showers, cold baths, whatever they may be doing. But it's those accomplishments of being able to do hard things and feel competent in what you're doing. And I think for a lot of people is they're not challenged enough, whether it be physically, emotionally, or spiritually. And then they're not kind of flexing the spiritual muscles, the mental muscles, and of course the physical muscles that I think as men we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, that actually brings up a great point from, you know, in James 1:2-4, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance, character. Well, that's Romans, but right. The harder stuff you do, it creates something in you. It builds some, like, this is a scientific approach, but it's also a spiritual and a biblical approach too, right? The harder things you do, the more resilience you're going to build up, the more confidence you're going to build up, the more character you're going to build up, the more hope you're going to build up. So therefore, if you're doing hard things, your hope in the Lord and your hope in your, like, everything just gets easier and stronger, but you have to do the hard stuff initially.
Yeah, totally. And if you're not willing to do the hard stuff, I mean, it's not easy. We chose a time. We work out at 5:30 in the morning, and getting up at 5 is not easy. It's a struggle. But I guarantee you, the moment you get past that, I don't want to go, because I have that every morning. But the moment I get past that and I just realize like, hey, this is something that I have to trick myself a lot of the times being, is that I know this is good for me. I didn't feel good right now, but it will feel good once it's all over. Because I've never left one of our workouts or discussions with the guys and been like, that was pointless. I wish I wouldn't have gone. Even though like on our last workout, we were like, that didn't feel like we had pushed ourselves. And then like the next day, I was like embarrassed at how sore my obliques were off of doing like planks and hip touches or whatever we called them. But I was just like, oh man, I am not 20 years old anymore. And it's very important that you stay on top of these things, like, because our bodies are the temple of God.
Yeah, how are you going to do the work if your temple's in shambles, right?
Exactly.
And so, yeah, I mean, dude, waking up at like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning sucks.
Yes, it does.
And then you have to throw kids on top of that, and then I'm going to work out and having to lead, right? And then I got to take kids to school. I'm on a daily schedule by hour now. And that is not, if anybody knows me, knows that is not me. I am go with the flow. Oh, you want me to come here? I'll go there right now. Let's go do it right now. Okay, I'll go. We'll do this tomorrow. Like, and I'm a go with the flow. For me to be on a set schedule for myself is miserable. Waking up early and having to set an alarm and then going to bed late and doing 3 jobs, raising a family, doing it. Like, man, it sucks. But I am so stubborn that I won't let myself not do it. And having to waking up this morning, I got up and I'm like, dude, my knees hurt. My head freaking hurts. The last thing I want to do is get up. I'm like, yeah, I can just tell Chris to go open the door. So Chris doesn't have a key. Well, I got to go.
Yep.
All right, well, I'll just show up and then I'll just kind of hang out. Okay, well, I'm going to show up and hang out. And now I'm going to work out. Okay. And now I feel great. Yeah. Like, dude, we worked out this morning. I was miserable. I had a headache. Worked out. I ate a good breakfast. I feel fantastic. I want to go for a run now.
Yeah, you were talking about, like, I'm going to go for a run this afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was interesting because, when we started this, you don't necessarily see, like, all the benefits that it's going to work out. Because, like I said, we probably got to throw out there some ideas of, like, hey, how do you know what your worth is? And, I'll just give you this story. When I was first married and I found out that my ex-wife was cheating on me, you want to talk about worth going down the drain. I don't know if I've ever told you this. I had an expo marker that I had written everything that was wrong with me on the shower and the mirrors, and I was able to fill it up. Like, when she, like, left the house, I internalized all of this, not as, like, she was a bad person. I made it about, like, hey, this is how crappy of a person I am, and because of all of these things, this is why she was doing what she was doing.
That's some Unabomber stuff, dude.
It, like,
do you have a manifesto I need to be worried about, or something?
It was bad. It was bad because, like, I was like, oh, nobody would do this unless I had done this for them. And then, like, I went through it and I read it, and, like, God and the Holy Spirit was just kind of, like, looking at it going, he goes, I don't care what you wrote on that. He goes, none of that is true. And, we've talked about this before, but automatic negative thoughts. I learned this from a psychologist or brain scientist, and it's called ANTS. It's an acronym. Automatic negative thoughts. And I just realized, like, man, how many of these do I actually have that when a situation comes up, I immediately gravitate towards the negative? And I had to learn, like, and this was a process, but I learned it truthfully in the gym because I started working out every single morning because I was not getting good sleep. And so I was, like, up at 4:35. I had to be at school at 7:30, 7 o'clock. But I got up at 4:30, went to the gym, but put podcasts in. And a lot of the things that I learned were through the challenges of physically pushing myself to exhaustion. And then after about a month of that, like, all of this weird negativity started slowly going away. And it wasn't like an overnight fix, but it was a, like, disciplined approach to spiritually becoming fit, because every single morning I was listening to podcasts that were faith-based. I bought, I don't know how many books to kind of, like, challenge that idea. And I had to fill my head with something that wasn't the negativity that I was constantly surrounded around. Because I think you know this, but I didn't tell anyone what had happened for more than 2 months because we were still trying to figure out if it was all going to work out. And being alone in that, being out in Kansas with no friends, it was me and myself. And that's why the manifesto, as you call it, existed. And so it was like terrible. But at the exact same time, it's like, okay, these are all the weaknesses, but God was just kind of showing me through this. He's just like, hey, let's work on this. And it was like an awesome every single day one-on-one. And that's why I also kind of enjoy also working out by myself, is because I can put a podcast in, I can listen, and I can push myself pretty dang hard really quickly at my own pace and challenge myself in the ways that I think, like, God wants us to be challenged, but also in a position to where I'm engaging in prayer and just kind of, like, listening to the word. Sometimes I just put the Bible on, just read through it.
Yeah, I mean, there's something you said that stands out to me, and it's, like, what we invest our time in, and like muscle memory, right? And this is, that's, I kind of very similar too, is like I'm investing a lot of my time. If I'm in the car, I'm not listening to music, I'm listening to podcasts and listening to, therapists and whatever else, because I just want to understand the brain and how this stuff functions, right? Dealing with a 13-year-old daughter and kids and all that kind of stuff. Like, I just want to understand better ways to communicate, better ways to understand why people do things the way they do, and listen to it. People always talk about muscle memory, right? It's not muscle memory. Your muscles don't remember the actual actions, right? Your brain is a hard drive, and you're constantly just adding in another file every time you do something. The same thing with, like, I'm not going to get up this morning. Well, of course you're not going to get up this morning, because you didn't do it last week. You didn't do it the week after. You didn't do it, right? You're just filling up your hard drive with the same files over and over and over again, and overloading your system to where it's like, well, this is what we know because this is all you put in. So it's like, if you just started to change that out, like, those files start to delete because you're adding new files into it. And so that same idea of, like, what are you investing in? And there's this great analogy of, what if I gave you, this morning you woke up and I gave you $86,400.
Yeah, I know this one.
Yeah, right? It's great. Like, you would figure out how to spend, like, if you
But it goes away at the end of the day.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it goes away, and every day you get $86,400. Could you spend it all?
Yeah.
Could you spend it all in one day? Well, of course you can. I could think of 100 things I would want to go buy right now. And then the next day you have a brand new $86,400. What are you going to buy? Right? And you could spend it and do whatever you want. Well, yeah, it's the same thing with our life. So we have 86,400 seconds per day. How are you going to spend that time? Are you going to spend that time swiping in the doom scroll and wasting your life away and creating those hard drive files over and over again? Or are you going to get up and you're going to live your life? Because I guarantee you there's somebody out there right now that needs a Jesus figure, and it needs to be you. Yeah. And you're not fulfilling your God-given destiny of what you're supposed to be doing in this life.
Totally. And I mean, and it goes into it. It's like, none of this is supposed to replace your worth, though. I want to be clear on that. Like, your body doesn't replace your worth. Like, working out doesn't replace your worth. Reading your Bible doesn't replace your worth. Your worth is really determined on the contingency of contentment with who you are and how God made you. And when you get to that point, you realize that everything else is a byproduct of the things that you're already doing or should be doing. What you had said, I was like, immediately the quote that came to my mind is, if I didn't do it today, most likely I'm not going to do it tomorrow either. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. Like, no, if you're not willing to do it today, you're probably not willing to do it tomorrow either. And so we get into these mindsets, and I like what you said there, like the files, and eventually the files get stacked up of not doing what it is, and then it ends up turning into something like, oh, this is actually who I am, rather than there's the intention of this is what I'm going to do. And if you just kind of replace it with the file of doing along a lot of those things, like, you end up finding like, oh, this is worth my time. And then things that are worth your time, you find that there's more value in it. And I think when you find value, that's when you, like, I think, begin to see what your worth is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with the working out and that kind of stuff, like, dude, for me, it's intentionality of, why am I working out? To be honest, I could care less about working out. But there's a reason why, because I have a value in Christ, and I have a longevity that I need to adhere to, right? He's given me a plan for my life that I know some of it, and so I'm going after it. Well, in order for me to go after it, I need to be A, B, and C. Well, if I'm going to speak to men about being a man and reading their Bible and all this kind of stuff, well, I'd have to adhere to so much time and spending time in the Word myself. Well, I have to be physically fit in certain aspects if I'm going to be able to take, right? So that's my value and my worth, because I know what he needs.
Yeah.
Right. And I know the worth that he has for me.
Yeah.
And in me. And so, like, I'm going after it, and that's why I'm doing these things. It's not because I really want to work out. I really want to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go do these things. No, I really don't. But I know I need to, because he has a value on my life that I have to live out.
Yeah. And that's what it comes down to is, I mean, it's being that servant-hearted of Christ, and, like, looking at all of Scripture and looking at what Jesus, like, requires of us. I mean, that to me is the most daunting ask of all time. It's like, hey, what's your worth? Because, like, the most terrifying verse, I think, of all of Scripture is, I've done all these things in your name, but Christ is going to be like, I never knew you. And, like, I'm always wondering, like, I don't ever want that to be me. God, help me in my unbelief. Like, what are the things that I can be doing that you and I get to have better relationship? But it literally just comes back to, it's like, are you a follower of Christ? And are you following him in a way that is honoring to his early on commands of, like, what he taught his disciples and what he was kind of showing them through like private teachings of parables, going through discipling one and then investing that again into other people.
I love 2 Corinthians 13, right? Or talking about the love that everybody's used for every single wedding on the history of the world, right? Love is all these things, love is all these, right? But then at the end of it, there's one of the greatest pieces of it is the greatest of all these is love. Like love conquers all things and love is eternal, right? And I think like if from a character aspect, that's the only thing that we take with us into heaven is love. Do you love yourself? Like you got to love yourself. You can't be a Christ follower unless you love yourself, you love people, and you love God. Like, that is what is required. So you have to start with, you can't love somebody else until you love yourself.
Yeah, but you have to go with the Greek word that they're used there, which is agape.
Agape, yeah.
And that agape love is it was actually like a newly introduced love that was attached to Jesus, which was like a sacrificial, unrelenting love. And it's specific, and that's why I love like the Greek, because they have like layers of love.
They have multiple words.
Yeah, they have multiple words for things, and so like they're very specific when they say like this is the type of love. Because like we can say like, oh, I love my dog, or I love my cat, and I love my wife. Like those are very different things, but those are layers.
Hopefully,
yeah.
Things, yeah.
But then when I say love as Christ love, it's a very specific of self-sacrificing. It's the type of love that Christ had shown, which is it's not self-seeking. It's not, which is everything before or afterwards where it says like, what is love? And that is the example of Christ. And so what Paul is writing there is the examples to follow, which is Jesus and how he loved, which isn't the soft love. It isn't the, very nice. It was sacrificial. It was best interest of everyone else rather than you love.
So wake up and do the hard things because somebody needs you to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My favorite Mark Twain quote, eat a frog first thing in the morning and everything else in the day will be easy to you.
Yeah, I know you love that one. Don't you have that up somewhere?
No, I was on my blog post thing that I had written about when I did the mental health book a long, long time ago. I did a whole chapter on that. Do the hard things. And it's exactly what you were saying earlier. You do the hard things. You didn't want to work out. You had a headache. But everything else in the day gets a lot easier after you do something hard. It's like a weird phenomenon. Like exhaust yourself in the morning. Push yourself till you can't breathe anymore. But your rest of your day, it's going to be fantastic. You're like, that makes no sense until you do it a few times and you realize I have more energy after I lost all my energy.
Well, see the endorphins and cortisols and just changing up the circumstances of your body,
Oh, yeah.
Really what it is, which is crazy because it's, the joy comes in the morning. So get up in the morning and do something hard.
Yeah. Well, let's finish it off. I mean, first episode we ever did, I talked about, hiking up for a poo, first thing. You never know what kind of glory you're going to find early in the morning.
I mean, I love a good sunrise,
Yeah. Well, it's like fishing, There's those moments where it's like first thing in the morning, there is a great time because the bugs are just hitting the tops of the waters. So, one thing I'm looking to get into now is fly fishing. So I've been watching a lot.
Nerd.
Yeah, I know. My wife has been like, what are you
welcome
doing?
to
like,
the
watching
to the
fly
jungle.
fishing videos on YouTube. She's like, I'm like, I'm learning the timing and the tempo. Like I haven't even put together my rod yet, but I'm really looking forward to it because we're going to go on vacation this weekend and get some time in, and I'm just going to be practicing.
Yeah, so we did at the high school this week was teaching them how to fly cast. And we did it in the big open courtyard and in front of the entire school having lunch, which was kind of awesome. But it's the same thing, man. Everybody wants to jerk it as hard as you possibly can. It's like you can't.
Smooth.
You have to go smooth, and you have to wait a second, and you have to get that line. So you're doing this beautiful figure eight the entire time, and every time you drop it down, you know exactly what you did wrong because that line is going to tell you.
Yeah,
it's so fun, man. When you're out fly fishing, I remember Colorado this last summer, up in the middle of nowhere, there isn't a soul around.
Yeah,
and just sitting there fly fishing by myself. And the water is clear for 100 yards into this lake. And you can just see exactly where the fish are, and you're just watching the fish all right, I'm going to drop the fly right here because I know that fish is working its way that way, and it just sits in the water. And it's that was a good cast, but it wasn't good enough. because you can tell like he's not even interested in it. So then you pull back and do it again, and you're just going over and over. But the second that trout, man, just comes up and slurps it up, and you have that half a second where you got to set that hook, man, it is glorious.
I'm excited for that day.
Yeah, and then you rocking the cowboy hat, man. You just look like a thug out there.
Yeah.
Not all prissy. You got the cowboy hat on, and I like it.
Yeah. Maybe my wife will love me. No.
Maybe.
Yeah. And again, just finding your own things, because like, honestly, when you're out there fishing, like the world also kind of like slows down. And I think that's like, I know for you and I, we both like, we're wanting more times than not to like get back to the river, get back to the lake and like do fishing, because there is something peaceful about it. It's not like, hey, when we've got the kids out there, when we're teaching them, we're not enjoying the fishing. We're hoping that they enjoy the fishing, setting lines, casting, doing all that fun stuff. Because in our last trip, we didn't catch a fish, but I talked to a few of the guys that I invited from Jesus Church, and they were like, dude, that was a lot of fun. I've never casted before. No, I didn't I've never thought about it, but like,
it's weird. Yeah.
Learning a new skill, like they just had fun throwing out a line. He goes, why did it always get caught? And I'm like, oh man, welcome to fishing. Because it always gets caught. It's inevitable.
Well, that just brings back to the point of like why community is so important. Like, why are they getting frustrated with not casting it far enough? Why are they getting? Because they have their buddies right there that are doing it a little bit better than them, right? And it's a competition. Like, whether you believe it's a competition or not, it's always a competition. But it's a friendly competition. It's fun to be like, know that you just accomplished it. Plus, you're building up your confidence, everything else. Fishing is a great confidence builder.
It is.
Or a destroyer of.
Or it's like the most that I've ever caught was on the one time I was doing catch and release. Like normally I'm catch and eat, and I'm very angry when I don't catch nothing because I don't get to eat. And then like the one day I caught 6. One, nobody else was around, so nobody else verified anything. The other thing I thought was pretty cool is that I was literally at the end of my line. I literally had no more string, and I forgot my string because I had like just decided to grab my pole and go. I had 2 hooks with me in my backpack, and whatever it was, I think it was like a crawdad, was just everything was biting it. And it was just like, maybe I just need to let him go and I'll catch more. Because I had caught 6 and I caught some good sized fish along that line, but it was just like a weird thing. And it's like, I'd cast it, and when it like catches at the end of the line, it was like, that was great. And then it just drops into the water. I'm like, oh, that's not fun. Trying to get it farther out, but I can only get it 20 feet, 30 feet, or whatever it was. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, we need to go fishing.
Yeah, I'm going this weekend.
Of course you are. Yeah, I told Ish we would plan a trip, so. Ish the fish wants the fish.
Wants the fish.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll plan a trip. We need to get out. Yeah, well, yeah, thanks guys for joining us as always. We'll be putting out some more here soon. Sorry for the delays. Our life schedules are a little chaotic at the moment, but we'll continue to put these out as long as you guys continue to listen. Follow us on social media, fieldfaith.org. Check out our website, fieldfaith.org. All our podcasts are on there. We also have merch as well. Donate. We are a 501c3, so all your donations go right to the nonprofit to help support these young men that are in our program. But yeah, check us out next time.
Yeah, give us a 5-star rating. It's a weird thing how new ratings and everything like that.
Yeah, for those of you that are in the social media world and understand, the more reviews and comments people leave and like on stuff, the more this stuff gets noticed. So if you like what we're doing, leave us some love so that way other people will find it too.
Yeah, appreciate it. Other than that,
peace out, guys.